So as I've been thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that the hardest thing in this whole build is figuring out what to say at the beginning of each video. Apparently I'm better at cutting joinery than I am at emceeing a video series. Anyhow, we have our floor structure already assembled, or already cut, and it is time for us to move vertical. We are going to work on the 4 wall posts today. So let's take a look on the computer and see what our SketchUp document says we need to be doing. The joinery on the top of these 4 wall posts is different than what we've cut so far. When we go to put our rafters on this, we're going to see that the rafter tails rest here on the top of the plates, and as the force pushes down, it wants to spread these plates apart. So we need to have a joint here that's going to resist being spread apart. So let's take a look at how this works. This has a tenon that expands at the ends. It's more narrow at the beginning, and it gets larger as we get further down. So this mortise is going to be sloped on the inside and sloped on the top, so that when we slide our tenon through, it's going to slide in this opening and down, and then we're going to use a wedge driven in from the outside that will keep it from spreading apart. We also have a pretty basic tenon to cut on the top of the post as well. I've said it a few different times now, but when we're laying out these cuts, the reference face is really important. And what the reference face is the side that we choose to draw all of our measurements off of. Typically, it would be the outside wall of a building like this, because these timbers have variance in them. If they have excess, they can be into the room, into the building, but the wall on the outside is pretty fixed. So we're going to use the outside to draw our measurements from. So we've come in for 1.5 inches here, and we've set up our 1.5 inch mortise. Now, you'll see we have this line down here, and the piece that's coming to join in here, there's a lot of downward force, and there's going to be pulling force this way. So in order to avoid setting all of that weight right on the tenon, we're going to cut this back here, which gives support all the way across for the beam that's going to be coming in here. Before we start cutting this slope though, it's helpful if we can cut out our mortise first, because it's easier when we have a square surface to measure and to work with. There is a whole lot going on with this joint here. I'm coming down 13 inches here and 8 inches. That is the size of the tenon when we have our horizontal timber coming in, and that's where we're going to cut this shoulder. Up here we have 1 inch space, and that's going to be where our wedge, the skinny end of our wedge, shows up. Let's flip it over here and look at what the other side looks like. Here is again 13 inches and 8 inches. So that would be like if we were cutting straight through, this would match up with the other side. However, the tenon itself is going to have a flare, so we've added 1 inch down here, and our wedge has a flare as well, so this is 1.5 inches. When I cut this lower line and this upper line, I cannot go straight vertical. I have to angle so that I come out at the reduced size on the other side. Does that make sense? I hope I get it right. I'm realizing now that I've defined these edges that it probably would help to put some reference lines on, at least for this first one. So I'm going to bring this all the way up here, bring this one all the way up here, and then on this side I need to connect not to the front of this, but right to where we are at the inside of our housing or our edge. So that's roughly the shape that I need to go, and then up here on this one, inch above, that's where our wedge is going to come out. So I can connect this line from here to here. And this is the shape then that we are going to hollow out. I'm holding a drill at an angle that matches this line right here, at least for this outer one, and now I did the same thing on this one here, and in the middle section I'm just going to go vertical to get out as much of the wood as quickly as possible. The mortise is cut all the way through. We have the skinny side up here on the top, and it flares out following these lines to the lower section. And now we're going to take our saw and we're going to define this shoulder right here. Once we get that curve cut in, we will just use our chisel and just gently bring this back down. I've got no power. It's interesting to me how this joint actually comes together. The beam that we're going to use here, when all is said and done, the top of it is going to be right across here. We're going to have this space, this gap open. And the reason that we have to have that gap is so that the beam can come in high enough and then slide down and into place, because the amount that we drop down is the same amount of space that we have here. So we slide in up high and then slide down once we go through, and then we fill this gap with the wedge from the other side. So this is ready to go now, and I'm going to go ahead and put the tenon on the top of the post. I just got to make sure that I put it perpendicular to this one and not in line, otherwise we'll mess up this post. You might be wondering why I don't cut all four of them at the same time and just kind of keep repeating. Somebody taught me a while back that if you do that from the start, you may end up with 4 mistakes. So what I try to do generally is cut one joint first, make sure I have that down, and then go through and cut the rest in repeating fashion. The only thing to pay attention now is that this mortise is off center, so I need to make sure I'm cutting mirror images, because I need a pair of these. I don't want to have 3 of one and 1 of the other, so just got to pay attention that I'm cutting the right mirror. So I'm going to put this down and get started on the last 3. At the end of the last video on floor joists, I mentioned that Wisconsin winter had arrived early. I'd been hoping that things would melt off so I could go out and get the wood to saw for the tie beams, but it hasn't thawed at all. So watch the weather report, and when you see Wisconsin going above freezing, that's when another video will be showing up.